The snow fell like ash from a dying world, blanketing the highway in a silence so profound that Emily could hear her own heartbeat echoing in the hollow chambers of her chest as she pulled into the gravel parking lot of the Pine Rest Motel, its neon sign flickering weakly against the pewter sky, casting intermittent pools of red light across the virgin snow that stretched endlessly toward a horizon she could no longer see. Baby Grace stirred in her car seat, a soft mewling sound that cut through Emily's numbness like a blade, reminding her that despite the wreckage of her marriage, despite the divorce papers still warm in her purse and the betrayal that had shattered her like glass against concrete, she was still responsible for this tiny life that depended entirely on her for survival. The motel clerk, a weathered man with kind eyes and calloused hands, didn't ask questions when she paid cash for a room, didn't comment on her tear-stained cheeks or the way she held her baby like a shield against the world, simply handed her a brass key attached to a plastic diamond and pointed toward room 7 with a gentleness that made her want to weep all over again. The room smelled of industrial disinfectant and decades of transient dreams, its avocado green walls and orange shag carpet a testament to better times that had long since passed, but it was warm and dry in hers, at least until her meager savings ran out and she was forced to confront the terrible reality of what came next. That first night, as Grace slept fitfully in the portable crib Emily had assembled with shaking hands, she lay on the sagging mattress listening to the wind howl through the gaps in the window frame and the rhythmic drip of melting ice from the gutters, trying to silence the voice in her head that whispered she had made a mistake, that she should have stayed, that love meant enduring anything, even the lies that had eaten away at her soul like acid. It was then that she heard it, the soft murmur of a television through the paper-thin walls, coming from room 8, the room next door, and for a moment she felt less alone in the vast emptiness of her new existence. The next morning, as she struggled to change Grace's diaper while balancing a cup of bitter coffee from the motel's ancient machine, she glimpsed him through the frost-etched window, a man in his 50s, tall and lean with silver threading through dark hair, loading groceries into his room with the careful precision of someone accustomed to solitude. He moved with a quiet grace that reminded her of her father, dead now these 10 years, and something about his presence felt both comforting and unsettling, like a half-remembered melody that danced just beyond the edges of recognition. Days blended into nights in a haze of feeding schedules and restless sleep, the snow continuing to fall as if the sky itself were weeping, and gradually she became aware that the man next door seemed to know her routines, appearing at his window when she took Grace for short walks to the vending machine, nodding politely when their paths crossed in the narrow hallway, always maintaining a respectful distance yet somehow always there, a constant presence in the periphery of her unraveling life. It was on the 4th night, as she paced the small room trying to soothe Grace's colicky crying, that she heard him through the wall, speaking softly on the phone, and her blood turned to ice water when she caught fragments of his conversation. "Emily's doing as well as can be expected. Yes, the baby is healthy. No, she doesn't know yet." The words hit her like physical blows, and she pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear more, her mind racing through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Was he working for Richard, her ex-husband, sent to spy on her, to gather evidence that she was an unfit mother? Was he some kind of private investigator, or worse, someone who meant to harm her and Grace? Fear crawled up her spine like spiders as she realized how vulnerable she was, alone in this remote place with nowhere to run and no one to call for help, her phone showing no signal bars and her car barely functional in the deepening snow. Sleep became impossible as paranoia took root in her exhausted mind, and she found herself checking the locks obsessively, moving the dresser in front of the door, keeping the lights on even as Grace finally settled into peaceful slumber in her arms. But the next morning brought a revelation that shattered her assumptions like sunlight through glass. Standing outside her door was a basket filled with fresh groceries, baby formula, and diapers, things she desperately needed but couldn't afford, with no note, no explanation, just the kind of thoughtful care that spoke of someone who understood exactly what she was going through. That evening, As the snow began to taper off and pale stars emerged in the clearing sky, she gathered her courage and knocked on his door, Grace sleeping soundly against her shoulder, and when he answered, she saw recognition flicker in his eyes, not the recognition of a stranger who had been watching her, but something deeper, more profound, like looking into a mirror that reflected not her face but her soul. "You know who I am," she said, and it wasn't a question because she could see the truth written in the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged as if carrying an invisible burden, the gentle sadness that seemed to emanate from his very being. "I'm David," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion, "and I've been looking for you for 27 years. The words hung in the frozen air between them like crystals, beautiful and fragile and devastating, and Emily felt the world tilt on its axis as understanding dawned with the slow inevitability of sunrise. "You're she began, but couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't speak the word that would change everything she thought she knew about herself, about her life, about the father she had been told was dead before she could walk. Your mother was afraid," David continued, his eyes never leaving her face, drinking in every detail as if memorizing her for another 27 years of absence, "afraid of what I had become, of the choices I had made, the people I had hurt trying to build something from nothing, and she thought you would be safer, better off, believing I was gone." Tears streamed down Emily's face as pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed began falling into place. Her mother's evasiveness about the past, the way she would change the subject whenever Emily asked about her father, the small inconsistencies in the stories that had never quite added up. "Richard knew," she whispered, understanding flooding through her like cold water. "He knew who you were, knew you were looking for me. That's why he wanted the divorce finalized so quickly, why he was so desperate to keep me from asking questions." David nodded, his own eyes bright with unshed tears, and Emily realized that her ex-husband's betrayal ran deeper than simple infidelity. He had stolen not just her trust but her very identity, using her father's love as a weapon against her, ensuring that Emily would never learn the truth that might have changed everything. "I hired a private investigator after your mother died," David said, his voice breaking, "found out about Richard, about you, about the baby, and I've been trying to find a way to approach you, to tell you who I am without destroying what little stability you had left, but when I learned about the divorce, about how he had treated you." He trailed off, unable to finish, and Emily saw in his face the same fierce protectiveness she felt for Grace, the same willingness to sacrifice anything for the person you love. Standing there in the doorway between their rooms, snow swirling around them like a benediction, Emily felt something shift deep inside her chest, a loosening of the bonds that had held her prisoner to other people's lies, other people's fears, other people's version of who she was supposed to be. The road ahead was still uncertain, still fraught with challenges and heartbreak and the daily struggle of single motherhood, but for the first time since signing those divorce papers, she wasn't facing it alone. She had found something she hadn't even known she was missing, a piece of herself that had been waiting 27 years to come home. "Grace," she said softly, turning so David could see his granddaughter's sleeping face, "I'd like you to meet your grandfather," and in that moment, watching this man who had searched for her across decades of silence and separation reach out with trembling fingers to touch his granddaughter's cheek, Emily understood that sometimes the most powerful form of redemption comes not from forgetting the past but from reclaiming the parts of it that were stolen from us, that love is not always about staying but sometimes about having the courage to leave, and that family is not just about blood but about the people who refuse to stop looking for you, even when the whole world tells them you're lost forever.